Good afternoon, guys. How are you all doing? Welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all very well. This is my third video this month. So it's still August at the moment. I'm going to start uploading in September. This will be towards the end of September, actually, when this video goes out. I've been trying to bank as many videos as I can this month, just so that when I get back into the swing of uploading regularly, I've just got a bit of breathing space. But this is my second video I filmed this week, and so my brain, I'm not gonna lie, is aching because I've just got so much information in it. And been doing a lot of research, but this is a really good topic. I really enjoyed this one. So the past two videos were on the horse-drawn equine ambulance and the horse-drawn human ambulance, and both of those videos revolved a lot around World War One. And it was while searching for images for those videos that I kept seeing this image of a horse in a sling being put onto a ship, and honestly, it looked traumatizing. I mean, the amount of panic that horse must have felt. The things we did to horses in years gone by, honestly. And I thought, oh, actually, it'd make a really good video. And also I've got plenty of images for this video, which is always exciting and makes it far better. So I thought that's the topic we're going to choose for this week's video. Now, obviously, we still transport horses on boats to this day. Most of the time it's on a horse box, so it's a little less traumatizing for the horse. They can still get like motion sickness or seasickness, actually, and horses can be really poorly from going on the ferry. It just still does happen, but not as traumatizing as it was back hundreds and thousands of years ago. I don't know, and someone can let me know in the comments, if we still move Shetlands on a boat, kind of on pens. I've seen a picture of it somewhere and I cannot find it again, and I'm sure I read somewhere that Shetlands are moved by boat, but I can't find any evidence of it now. And I'm sure there's other countries that probably move ponies from island to island by boat, so it does still happen, but we're not talking about big ships where they spend days and days out at sea. So we can actually date horses being transported by boat right back to 1500 BC. And then they found a seal which had an image like pressed into it of a horse on a boat, which is kind of clear evidence that horses were being transported by boat back then. And the reason why horses need to be transported on boats, well, for invasions, battles, war, trade, because you're wealthy and you want a fancy horse from another country, so sometimes they've got to cross the sea to get to you. Maybe you're moving country and you wanted to take all your horses with you. There are a number of reasons why horses needed to cross the sea, and unless it was in recent times, which now obviously you can pop them on the aeroplane and fly them to your new location, it needed to be by boat. There are many paintings that show horses being transported by boat. And the Bayeux Tapestry shows a scene where horses are being taken on boats and off of the boats. The tapestry depicts the events leading up to the Norman conquest of England in 1066, culminating in the Battle of Hastings. We know that the Vikings carried ponies on their longships over to Iceland. For this video, we are going to look at horses being transported by ships around World War One and just before that, just because obviously there's so much more information on it and a lot more images available. We already know that around 6 to 8 million horses, donkeys and mules served in World War One, and in Britain we purchased over 1 million. Now, we just didn't have enough of a supply in this country, so we actually had to purchase from other countries like Australia, Argentina, Canada, America, and those horses had to get on ships to get to us. I always think those horses that came from Australia, can you think how many days they were out to sea to get to us? For them to get a bit of training before getting back on another ship to go out to war, like it's horrific really when you think about it, you know, what those horses had to go through even before they got to war. Now, how did they get the horses onto the ships? This, I think, was probably the nicest way. That's where they had a sort of chute that went up onto the deck, and they sort of laid a kind of coconut floor matting which gave the horses a little bit of grip, and they sort of just followed each other up onto the boat. And of course there were some that didn't want to go aboard, but generally speaking this was a lot less stressful and traumatizing. Not very often boats could come right up against the dock and literally horses could just cross a small ramp onto them, but this didn't happen very often. Often horses were moved onto the boats, ships by sling. Now this was quite stressful for them. They often panicked. There were many reports of soldiers and crew members getting kicked when the horses got into the slings and they sort of felt their weight being taken. They would often panic, and they would very often cover their heads with sacks, scarves. They would blindfold them to try and reduce the amount of panic they had. No, obviously one of the reasons for using a sling, not only obviously to get them on board, if the ships were particularly big it was very difficult to get them up onto the ship, but horses would be kept below deck, sort of in the bows of the ship, and there wouldn't be any ramps to get them down into there, so you literally have to kind of, you know, sling them over to the ship and then drop them down low into it. I'm sure it won't surprise you to hear that there was the occasional fatality when moving horses by the sling, when things like the leather straps broke and the horses fell out. Now these photos didn't come with any information, but I believe it was an older shot, and I think this was actually training, so teaching the soldiers how to manoeuvre horses onto boats and onto ships. So yeah, this was all practice before, I guess, actually doing it for real and heading out to war. We also saw horses put into these, I think they were actually called horse boxes, little boxes that would be then winched up and onto the boats. They were padded out. They're not that different really to how horses are loaded when going onto aeroplanes. I mean, slightly nicer than being in a sling, but still terrifying. Here we can see another version of these horse boxes, this time with slightly higher sides on them. Again, I think probably a nicer way of getting the horses on board. I mean, nothing about them swinging in the air in a container is nice, but I think they would have felt a little bit more secure, especially with the higher sides. I read that sometimes to move mules onto the ships, they actually used to put them into cargo nets, and so their legs would hang through the gaps and they just lift them up like that and put them on. I guess maybe it would save a little bit of time than putting them into a sling. Still utterly terrifying for them. And I think it used to take around 4 kind of either crew or soldiers to put one horse in a sling and get it onto the ship. I mean, yes, they were very quick at it, but it still took quite a long time. You know, by the time you put the sling on, attach the horse, got the horse up in the air, put it over, taking all the stuff off the other side. And the bigger ships would have a couple of kind of harbour crane arms to be able to load, so they weren't just using one at a time. But even so, it was quite a lengthy process. And one of the biggest issues they found, especially early on, and they really had to learn from this, was that they quite often at the beginning loaded horses first, and then what happened is either bad weather would come in or they would for some reason not be able to set off, and then the horses would be stuck on a ship in a holding area for 24 hours, 48 hours with no air coming in, because obviously they weren't sailing. And it'd be absolutely horrific for the horses. It really would be. It was incredibly dangerous for them. So they did learn from that. Chose to put the horses on last, so in case there was any delay or anything like that. And the other thing to think about is also the amount of food that had to come on board and the amount of water. You know, not only hard feed, but the hay, the straw for bedding. I don't know with bedding whether they just used the coconut matting or they did add straw on as well. But they had to take a heck of a lot, because sometimes they were carrying hundreds of horses. So ships built stalls in their holds, and quite often, not always, they had slings in the stalls so that they could actually lift the horses, not off their feet, but just take some of the pressure off of them. Their feet always had to still touch the ground. Now, you could only do this on a nice, calm sailing day. If it was bad weather, the horses had to balance for themselves, so you would not want them to be in a sling. Ideally, you'd want the sling completely taken away, otherwise it'd be very dangerous. Now, I found what a typical routine on board would be like. 6 a.m. water, 6:30 hay and feed, 8 a.m. men's breakfast, 9 till 11 clean and groom horses, 11:30 water and feed with hay, 12 o'clock men's dinner, 1 till 3 p.m. get forage up for the next day and groom the horses again, 3:30 water and hay, 4 p.m. men's tea, 5 p.m. hay and water, 8 p.m. hay and water. Now, horses did have accidents, pick up illnesses and die on board. Bad weather was a big cause. If the ship hit a storm, horses could have accidents in the stalls and end up breaking legs. Lack of fresh air, they actually often suffocated down below because trying to get fresh air down into the bowels of the ship was really quite difficult, and the thought of them suffocating is horrific, isn't it? Motion sickness, as I mentioned earlier, but really severe injuries, and sadly, if they did die, they were thrown overboard. Horses tend to have their back shoes taken off when going onto the ship, and also were clipped if they were coming from a cold country to a hot country. Now, some warships with equine cargo on board were torpedoed, did end up sinking, and horses and mules were lost to the sea. And there are stories of like crew members staying with the horses as the ships were going down, even though there were lifeboats, they chose to stay with the animals, which, oh my goodness, it just breaks your heart, doesn't it? The thought of it is just absolutely heartbreaking, but they didn't want to leave their sides. An example of a boat lost was the SS Anglo-Columbian, which was a British cargo steamer that was captured and sunk. It was en route from Quebec to Avonmouth with 831 horses on board. I didn't realise that Avonmouth was actually a very busy port for horses coming into this country, so horses that the British Army had brought from abroad. And it was all really a very quick turnaround for those horses. They'd get taken off of the ships, they'd go into quarantine, they'd only have about 2 weeks in quarantine, 2 weeks of that training as well, and then they'd be sent out to war. They never got a chance to get over the trauma of being on a ship. It was straight into training and then they were off again. It's heartbreaking. Well, sometimes reading this history, like, it's incredible and it's amazing to know about what these horses went through. It's a very noisy tractor in the background, sorry, so loud. But on the other hand, it's utterly heartbreaking to read. It really is. It just, what we put them through. Yeah, if you kind of think too much about it, you just want to cry, because I can't imagine owning horses. I can't imagine doing that to them. But yeah, it happened, and we will continue to say that the horses helped us to win the war, and we wouldn't have survived without them. And they are incredible, utterly incredible. So I hope you enjoyed that video, and the fact that we had more photos makes it much more interesting. And I will see you guys again next week.